This is pretty much a third part in the more updated videos that we've just added onto the site. And we hope these will give you much more knowledge than the videos that we're dealing with the court, which would have most likely led you to stay in thinking that you had an edge against the Society of Civil Participation. We're dealing with Osborne's Concise Law Dictionary. It's a great little, not hard to read book that kind of gives you more of a summary in a very concise manner. And we're going to read out of equity because this has a lot to do with what we're talking about, because equity is fairness. Equity is also synonymous with the word conscience. And we've been dealing with conscience so often in the last videos that I think this is important for us to look at. There are a number of, the first thing it deals with, we're going to read the definition of equity as they have it here, and then we're going to go into the maxims of equity, because there's a number of them. The first definition is equity, primarily fairness or natural justice, a fresh body of rules by the side of original law, founded on distinct principles and claiming to supersede the law. That means it will surpass the law. Equity will be stronger. And claiming to supersede the law in virtue of a superior sanctity inherent in those principles. Equity is the body of rules formulated and administered by the Court of Chancery to supplement the rules and procedure of the common law. By the Judiciary Act 1873, the Court of Chancery was amalgamated with the common law courts to form the Supreme Court. And rules of equity are administered in all divisions of the court, and where there is any conflict between the rules of law and equity, equity is to prevail. Here are some of the maxims of equity. Equity acts in personam. Equity acts on the conscience. Equity will not suffer a wrong to be without a remedy. Equity follows the law. Equity looks to the intent rather than the form. Equity looks on that as done which ought to be done. Equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. Equity remedies are discretionary. Delay defeats equities. He who comes into equity must come with clean hands. He who seeks equity must do equity. Equity regards the balance of convenience. Where there are equal equities, the law prevails. Where there are equal equities, the first in time prevails. Equity, like nature, does nothing in vain. Equity never wants, lacks a trustee. Equity aids the vigilant. Equality is equity. Equality will not assist a volunteer. Equity will not permit a statute to be a cloak for fraud. And I think you're really going to have to slow those down and really start to review them, because there are so many things there that are involved with Christianity and conscience and moral ability to make a decision to either be a participant or a non-participant, to be civilly dead or civilly active. And the choice is based on consent. So when we look at many of the things that are in here, equity acts on the conscience. Well, we know equity is synonymous with conscience. It's the highest moral thing. So if you cannot do something based on you believe it morally wrong, then equity has to come into play to protect you. You can't be made to do something that you believe is morally wrong. And there must be something there to come into your aid. When we're going further, it says, equity, of course, follows the law. So wouldn't that relate almost to Christ? He didn't come to destroy the law, he came to fulfill it. It says in Psalms 98 that God will judge the world in equity, not in common law. If he was going to judge the world in law, we'd be dead. So, are you not seeing the patterns here that are here for everybody? Equity looks to the intent rather than the form. So even though it may look like there was an intent to commit a crime here, even though the child couldn't do it, it can't look to the form. It has to look to the intent. It would go, well, there was no intent for a child to be involved in this. Whoever they're talking about here had no intent. Therefore, this would be null and void if it was there to harm the child. Maybe they were framing someone here, because the Constitution is a frame of society. Because man's involved in sin, so it's going to frame sin. That's why this is there intending to create a sinner. And the other one reverses it and says, no, reverse it. Civilly dead. Here's the remedy. Here's the valuable token. You don't have to perform. Accord and satisfaction. Everything's done. Going a little further here, equitable remedies are discretionary. Delay defeats equities. That would make sense. If you delay to do what's right, don't expect equity to come flying in to save you. He who comes into equity must come with clean hands. That means you better be ready to wipe the slate clean. It's all or nothing. You can't stay on both sides and expect equity to be there for you. And remember, equity was already on here because there was clean hands, because there's no way the child was involved in this. He didn't put his hand to this. He who seeks equity must do equity. Well, that would make sense. You better do what you talk. Don't talk the walk and then not walk the talk. And it says, where there are equal equities, the law prevails. Where there are equal equities, the first in time prevails. Well, what was the first in time in here? Well, the first name would be the forename, so that's the first name. It was called the prenomen. So that's the first in time. The surname didn't come first in time. In fact, they weren't even established until the 13th century. So you can understand that there are very, very serious things that need to be reviewed under the understanding of equity. Equity, like nature, does nothing in vain. Man is vanity. What he does is vanity, artifice. Equity never wants or lacks a trustee. So there has to be a trustee involved with this. Who do you think the trustee be in any matter to do with government? Well, wouldn't it be chance they have the public guardian and trustee's office? Equity aids the vigilant. That makes sense? You better be very determined. You better be a believer, or you won't get through this. Equity will not assist a volunteer. Did you volunteer into something to go contrary to your equitable relief? Did you say, I can be the surety? Well, that's completely contrary to the party that we're talking about here being the surety. How can the public guard come in as the surety for conscience if you're being the surety? You're seeking relief. Well, you can't get relief if you're trying to say that you can pay for all the relief. And equity will not permit a statute to cloak for fraud. So if in any way this document's trying to cloak a fraud, it won't work. Equity is going to come through on that. And that's why they issued this. But they issued it, of course, to the hands of us playing a trustee for the innocent party. So we pay the debt because of our own participation to walk away from our conscientious objection, civilly dead position that we had from the beginning. And because our parents were involved, we say, well, I didn't know any different. Well, okay, fine, we'll stop. No one said you had to continue. So it's either participation or non-participation. We hope we can get this through most people's minds. We're not talking about inactive participation, we're talking about non-participation. So no, you can't be involved. So you better not be politically active, stop talking about the government, what they aren't doing or what they are doing. It's got nothing to do with you when you are a non-participant. It's like you're in a separate jurisdiction, you have nothing to do with them. And that jurisdiction was already paid for. Purchase done, over. So, review the videos together, take the time. Hopefully all this will start to sink in and start to see light at the end of the tunnel.